So to get started, we're going to just go over just a couple reasons of going to Microsoft Entra and specifically Azure Active Directory. But first, what we need to do is just kind of like we're going to set the table, set the stage for today, and these are going to be the main points that we're going to go over. The first one going to be single sign-on or seamless single sign-on. Another benefit is the increased security of identities, leveraging the Microsoft security stack. We're going to talk about controlling access to applications, endpoints, and moving towards zero trust, monitoring and auditing of sign-ins with your applications, and of course, we're going to talk about cost and the total cost of ownership. So get started, we're going to just talk about what is SSO. I've heard of SSO. What does SSO mean? There's a couple of different flavors and varieties of SSO. So we're just going to break this down and try to simplify it a little bit. So what is SSO? So you may have seen it as same sign-on. So what same sign-on is when you log into a application and you use, like if I use my Josh at Patriot login, I'll use my Josh at Patriot login to log into that thing, whatever it may be. And then having like another application or endpoint, and then I'll log into that. And then I'll type in my credentials, Josh at Patriot, and then I have to enter my password, go through MFA or any other security prompts to log in. So that's the same sign-on where it uses basically like that same UPN or email address, that same identity. Single sign-on, you log into the thing once, and then if you log into another web app, it will take the same token, that same credential from your browser, and then it'll pass those credentials over into the other application. So instead of having to log in multiple times, like in the same sign-on, you just log in once, and then the token will get passed across. Of course, there is like, if you're using a different browser or if you're using like incognito or in private mode, there will be like another token that is needed because it's effectively creating a new session. Now, seamless sign-on with Microsoft Entra and Azure AD, what it does is it allows you to take the login that you use when you're logging into your Windows workstation, whether it's Windows 10 or Windows 11, and then it'll pass that login token up to the web application, so you don't even have to log in again, right? So it's just like it takes single sign-on and then adds that extra layer to where it can cut down on the number of logins for your users in your environment. So having the seamless sign-on can cut down on, those authentications that do occur, and you can put quantifiable data and metrics around that, because the time it takes to log into a web app or one of your line of business applications can be cut down drastically using that. Azure Active Directory also supports multiple protocols, SAML, OIDC, OAuth. I can do identity or service provider initiated. You can set up web links and shortcuts. If you want to do like a shortcut to a SharePoint Online site, you can create that and display it as one of the custom apps inside of a dashboard for a user. And so it supports multiple protocols and applications for your endpoints. So if you have a custom web app that is using OIDC, you can have an app registration for it, or if you're using a public SaaS app that supports SAML, you can set up the connection as well. All right, another great benefit of using Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Entra is that you can leverage the Microsoft security features. So multi-factor authentication, right? We're familiar with MFA. We use it to log into our banks, and then having MFA on our accounts creates that extra level of security. Self-service password reset that enables you to have your end users actually go through the process of resetting their password based upon the criteria that you select for your tenant. And there's quantifiable metrics that you can put on that as well. There's research that shows that between $60 to $100 is the average cost for every password reset that occurs. So having your help desk, if you just like reach out to them, hey, how many password reset tickets do you have? And then you can just multiply that out to be able to find out like what a savings would be by automating that process. You can also leverage dynamic groups. So say, Josh is in the marketing team. You can create a group for everybody that's in the marketing team, and then use that group to help secure your endpoints. And then also, if you have Azure Active Directory synced with Azure AD Connect to your AD domain on-prem, you can use those same groups as well. There are some advanced privilege. There's some advanced features. One of them being privileged identity management, and this one's great because say you're a global admin, you're not a global admin when you're asleep. So instead of having those credentials being, on when you're in vacation, that permission is just not applied to that account without the privileged identity management. You can use user and device sign-on risk. So if there's impossible travel or like an unlikely sign-on, you can have it be flagged in your environment. Entitlement management and access reviews for your applications. So if you have your ERP system or like a some type of like time management system, whatever it may be, whatever application you have, you can set up entitlement management packages for groups of users. And then you can also, if you give everybody in the legal team access to this application, and you can have access reviews, so where they can go in and verify if they need to continue to have access to that application. All right, and there's also conditional access. So what conditional access does is that it gets the signal from wherever it is, right? So here's my login from this IP address on this type of device. And then through your conditional access policy, it will make a decision based upon the criteria that you set for it. So if it's like, hey, if I'm not in my trusted location, if I'm not part of my IP fence, then it'll have that enforcement of, am I going to block access? Am I going to allow access? Am I going to prompt for MFA? What am I going to be able to do? So with the conditional access, along with some of the other security features, that's where you can start moving your environment to that zero trust model to help secure your environment further. With the endpoints, you can also control the access management to the endpoints. So one of them is, do you want to have the application an assignment required, or do you want it just to be available for your entire tenant, right? So if you want anybody that has a login in your tenant to be able to access this application, then you can just hit that slider to no. Otherwise, you can set specific access to those applications and to those endpoints based upon users and groups. And you can also have specific roles assigned depending on the application to be able to have like an admin group, or if it's like a sales group or something like that, to scope permissions on the other side of the application. And all of that is dependent upon, does the application support it? So say you've got AWS and you only want someone to have the role in AWS of database administrator, you can create a database administrator role, and then through the provisioning portion, it will pass over that just-in-time token in the SAML authentication workflow to AWS. Is like, here's the user and here's their role, and that's all they'll be able to access in the AWS side. And for your end users, so when they see their apps, there is the My Apps portal. You can view that at myapplications.microsoft.com or just myapps.microsoft.com. It'll redirect you. Feel free to log into that and see what applications that you do have. So here's just a basic screenshot of one of my users in my test tenant. So you'll probably have a lot more applications like Excel and Exchange Online and OneDrive and things like that. And there's also that plus button next to the apps that you can allow your users to create their own dashboards. So for me in my workflow, I create one for my SharePoint and OneDrive because those are the things that I log into the most. And you can even push out specific app portals to your end users based upon groups. So if you say you have 5 applications that are needed for your help desk staff, you can create a help desk group and then apply the My Apps portal help desk to those users. And of course, anytime we set something up, we need to be able to like verify, hey, what's going on? How do I check in on it? So it does leverage the Azure Active Directory monitoring, and you can monitor sign-in logs for users, for the entire tenant, and you can even go directly to the app level. And then once you click on one of the sign-ins that it does occur, you can verify basic info, device info, and even go into the conditional access to see which conditional access policies were applied to see if this was blocked or enabled. And in this example, the result was not applied because of it was just like a test scenario. So having the monitoring available that leverages the Azure Active Directory tenants and Azure Active Directory monitoring capabilities allows you to view your logins at scale. Auditing is also available for your application endpoints. So as you see here, there was an app role assignment granted. I removed some assignments. So you can kind of use this to verify, hey, what's been changing, or what happened to the access. It's been very helpful for me working with other clients where there was an automated process that removed a group, and then it would show, removed app role assignment from this group because that group was inadvertently deleted, and then was able to use that log to find another log to find the log that showed the process that was doing that, and then we changed it so we didn't have to do that anymore. So this is like if there's updates to the endpoint, it is all logs, so you can kind of check on from an administrative side what's going on with your application endpoint. All right, and the big one, cost. Right, could have started with this one, could have made it, 1 through 5. So a lot of our clients already have like a Microsoft E3 or even E5 license, which comes with the Azure AD P1, part of that Microsoft Entra suite. So you already have the capabilities, right? So instead of paying for an identity provider, whether it's like one login, OKTA, Ping, or even ADFS, so instead of having like the separate identity provider, this one's already available, and we see a lot of our clients being able to leverage that. So instead of having to pay for it twice, able to cut costs by reducing the software overhead. And so like that total cost of ownership really doesn't go up a whole lot because you're already paying for it a lot of times. And that's been experienced with most of the clients that we're working with, that they're already licensed for this, you already have it. It's just a matter of migrating your existing SSO implementation over to Azure AD. So here for a second, we're going to talk about OKTA specifically. So with Patriot being a Microsoft partner, they have provided us a Microsoft Transporter tool, which allows us to pre-stage the SSO applications from an OKTA tenant into Azure Active Directory. So this helps to cut down on time, but it also gives like a fantastic report of, hey, these are the apps that are currently enabled. These are the ones that are disabled. These are the apps that we can move over. This is what it matches inside of Azure AD. You can download the current assignments, and you can even view the protocols. So this helps with OKTA environments on the migration process because it gives you that data of what's going on to be able to see how it is currently configured. And also, there is a report that we can run that will give us an estimated time needed for the migration. So Patriot will definitely help you guys out with this report, and we will, do it as just kind of like an audit or overview before you can make a decision based upon like, hey, how long is this going to take? How many apps are we really using? What's the different protocols and things like that, and what does it match to? And how the migration works using the OKTA to Microsoft Azure AD Transporter tool is that there's an API key that gets created in the OKTA tenants, and then it's basically a web server that Patriot can run on the back end with that key and your tenant ID, so we can get that previous screen's dashboard loaded. And then after that, once we're ready to do the migration, we can set up an Azure AD app registration, and then we can do a selective migration on a couple of test apps and then migrate the rest of them over. So this will pre-stage the application. It doesn't change the SAML configuration of the applications, and it doesn't add assignments. So that is something that still has to occur, but it does cut down on that portion of creating the Azure AD applications. So it can drastically cut down time for migration. All right, so with the app migration, we got just a high level checklist, right? We're gonna, after the app is pre-staged, we're gonna add our SAML metadata, we're gonna configure access, set up any conditional access policies that are needed, and then we're gonna change and update the SAML configuration on the other application endpoint. And if you ever set up like a SAML app or a OAuth app or OIDC app endpoints, you know that like every developer is a little bit different and every application is just a little bit different. So there is like some variance, even though it uses the same protocols behind the hood that we have to account for. And that's where we work together and we engage like app vendors if we need to, depending on the app protocol. And as more and more applications and app developers have started to adopt this framework, it's become a lot easier. One of the things that has made great strides is on the provisioning piece. So some applications will allow for provisioning of the users into the user store of the application. Some of them like ServiceNow or even AWS are some of like the bigger apps, but I'm starting to see it more and more on a lot other apps to where once you have the authentication piece with the SSO side set up against Azure AD, the authorization occurs through that provisioning to allow for the users to be in the other application side for access to the application based upon the roles needed.